Hi, in this video I'll be making my very first doll. Let's get right into it.
I don't think it's printed.
I made a lot of iterations on my 3D model before I could settle on a design that actually worked. Unfortunately, I couldn't film the printing process because it was so incredibly stressful to me. I mean, this was the aftermath. But here I finally have all the parts ready. I start by doing something called suading. Using clear glue and a silicone tool, I coat the inside of all the joint sockets. This is to increase friction for posing and reduce powdering. I then use Gorilla Super Glue to attach magnets on the wrist joints. I do this for the head and feet off camera. Sorry about the state of my fingers, I got glue all over them and that really busted them up. Once the glue has dried, I start assembling the upper body and arms with a 1mm elastic string using a thin wire. I found it helped to alternate between the left and right arm parts to even out the tension. I then add tiny S-hooks made from old earrings to attach the wrist joints. I'm using two 1.5mm strings for the rest of her body, for added stability. Once both of the strings are inserted through her hips, I can assemble one leg at a time. Now I can finally attach all the parts with magnets. The head, the hands, the feet, and also the heels. And here she is, fully assembled at 24.5 centimeters. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but she's actually stable enough to stand on her own. Let's make a wig cap next. I start by adding plastic wrap and then a nylon sock to her head using rubber bands. I make sure to stretch out the fabric so there are no wrinkles. I'm also wrapping some thread around her face and ears. Then I finish off with one more rubber band to make the fit extra tight. I pour white glue on her head and spread it out with a brush. I do this 4 more times, letting the glue dry properly in between. I reference a tutorial by Maria Lazar. Once it's dried a final time for 24 hours, I can remove the rubber bands and cut off the thread. I take off the wig cap and cut off the fabric before I remove the plastic wrap. Then I trim away the excess. I put the cap back onto the head and then use a rubber band as a guide for the hairline. I mark it with a colored pencil. Then I remove the cap and trim it again. Nice and snug. I'm gonna make the hair out of yarn. I referenced Mosekito's tutorial. I start by wrapping the yarn around a piece of cardboard. Then I cut it off so I'm left with a bunch of strings. I loop them around a barbecue skewer. I found it quite annoying to brush out the yarn as is, so I untangled them first. If I untwist them a little at the bottom and insert my finger, they come undone pretty easily. Now I can brush them out quickly. I set my flat iron to 175 degrees Celsius and then flatten the wefts. It looks just like hair, and it's very soft. I remove the cap again and add new plastic wrap for protection. I use clear glue to attach the wefts. I cut and add them directly onto the wig cap. I'm using tweezers to help me, but it's a bit finicky. I briefly try a plastic flosser, but that's not working any better. I finally end up just using my fingers, which was the better choice, even if glue did stick to them occasionally. Once I reach the top of the head, I glue a row of wefts to the right and then flip them over to create a parting line. I continue to add wefts and remove excess glue with a pair of tweezers. I glue a row to the left and flip them over to complete the parting line. I add several tiny wefts in the front to create the hairline. I decide to end it in a widow's peak, though it's a bit offset here. I try to tame the hair a little by heating up a pair of tweezers with my flat iron. Then I add some more wefts. I remove the wig and cut away the glue to form a jagged hairline. I trim away some excess glue as well. And then I decide to add a couple more wefts on the inside. Now the wig is ready for a haircut. I start by using a cheap brow shaver to cut the bottom layer. But that did not work, so I switched to just cutting it with scissors. I then use a heated chopstick to curl the ends. It's too hot to touch with my bare fingers, so I put on a glove. I then cut the hair again, to the right length this time, and thin it out. I let down another layer of hair and repeat the same steps. I'm just imitating what they do at the hairdressers. I have no idea what I'm doing. Once all the hair is cut, I tame it one last time with a heated pair of tweezers. Finally, I add a little hair gel and the wig is finished. I actually wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the hair at first, so I just winged it. Page cuts seemed simple enough, and I think it turned out pretty nice. Now for the face up. I'm using soft pastel chalks from Stettler. For the sealant, I'm using my airbrush for the first time with Vallejo's matte acrylic varnish, mixed with some thinner. I use an old makeup brush to put down the first layer of blushing. I then switch over to a tiny cotton swab. I add shading to the ears and the lips and use a kneaded eraser to remove the excess pigment. I add a darker shade to the eyes. Now I'm using a nail brush to paint out the eyebrows. I wet it in water before brushing it on the pastel chalks. Once I have one brow down, I flip the doll head over to paint the other one. Let's try that again. Third time's a charm. There we go. I paint individual hair strands and continue to build up the brows with darker browns. I paint the corners of the eyes, creating a slight cat eye effect. I fill in the creases of the eyelid for more depth. I tried to paint in the mouth, but even a needle is too thick, so I switched back to the brush again, trying a paint wash instead. Here I'm adding a deeper red wash to the lips. Then I continue to fine-tune all the parts of the face, adding more paint where needed. Now it's time for the lashes. I coat the fake lashes in white glue so they clump together. Then I cut off the tips and glue on each individual piece to the eye. It's very finicky, as you can see. And then I decide to make it even harder and add lower lashes as well. Surprisingly though, this only took about an hour and a half, which I would say was well worth it. Now I'm gonna paint the eyes. I struggle quite a bit with this because the irises are just so tiny and I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I made so many mistakes, so I had to redo them quite a few times. But eventually they got to a state I was okay with. I finished them off with a drop of UV nail polish and cured them with a small UV lamp. With the face and eyes together, let's move on to the clothes. I'll be making a skirt using a second-hand shirt. Children's clothes are cheaper if you don't need a lot of fabric. Here I've dyed a piece of the fabric with black tea to make it look more vintage. I've cut up 2 skirt pieces and marked out where I need to fold. I use white glue on the edge of the skirt. I glue on both sides. Once it's dry, I fold the left side like so. I then add textile glue to the upper part and fold it again. I do the same thing on the right side as well. I heat press the folds using my flat iron. I glue darts on both sides. I can then trim off where I glued earlier for a neat finish to the skirt. I also trim off the ends of the folds to make the upper part of the skirt less bulky. And here we have both pieces with the same treatment. I tried to sew the pieces together, but it didn't turn out so well, so I'm using glue here instead. I then cut off the excess. Let's make the waistband. I glue the bottom end on both sides. Once that's dry, I cut out the waistband. And then glue it to the top of the skirt. It's a bit fiddly, but I manage. I then glue and fold the top for a clean finish. I glue the skirt together and trim off the excess. Now it's time for the clasp. I use a needle to poke 4 holes where I want the loop. I've inserted it here like so. Yes, it did take forever. I then bend over the ends and cut off any excess, and we have a loop. I do the same thing on the other side, only I've bent it to act as a hook. And there you have it, a tiny clasp. I made 2 shoulder straps real quick. I then attached them to the skirt with glue. And here's our skirt. Now let's make a shirt real quick. I also made 2 white tube socks out of an old t-shirt. And a pair of boots. And with that, she's finally done. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more from me, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye!